Hi, good morning, everybody. Just going to give it a couple of minutes until a couple more people have signed in, I think. If someone wouldn't just mind confirming that you can hear me and see the screen, that would be great, because a couple of weeks ago I messed up and was showing you nothing. Great, thank you, Georgina, I think that says. Okay, so we've got quite a lot to get through today in the presentation, so I'm going to launch into Nicaragua fairly quickly and skip the intro kind of stuff, since most of you have probably either listened before or hopefully know who we are and what we do. Today's presentation is going to be on Nicaragua, which is probably one of the lesser known Central American countries, and Panama, which I'm sure you've all heard of, if only for the canal. So, as you can see, we've got Panama right down the bottom of Central America, adjoining Colombia, and then Nicaragua right there in the middle. Starting off today with Nicaragua. The capital is Managua, which nobody needs to know about because it is absolutely horrible. It is not a city you want to stay in. It's big, it's ugly, and it's hot and messy. So basically, flying into Managua, we pick people up and straight away transfer them down to the very nearby town of Granada. This is a bit of a better map for you to get a sense of where everything is. So there in the middle, you've got Managua, located right on Lake Managua, and then here about an hour by road is Granada, which is a really beautiful colonial town and definitely preferable to staying in Managua. Occasionally, you've got people flying out of Managua quite early in the morning, in which case we give them just one night at the hotel. It's not a dangerous city or anything, it's just not particularly attractive, so don't waste your clients' time with giving them any time there. They call Nicaragua the land of lakes and volcanoes for fairly obvious reasons. You've got the largest freshwater lake in Central America here, which is Lake Nicaragua, Lake Managua, and then also quite a few other lakes dotted throughout the country. A lot of people don't actually realise that Nicaragua has a very extensive lowland area lying here to the east, which joins the Caribbean coastline. And along the Caribbean coast, they actually speak a form of English, of Creole English. So although the official language is Spanish, you do get some English spoken in the east side of the country. Some of the towns we're going to be talking about today, we've got, as I said, Granada. You've got the twin volcanic island here of Ometepe in the middle of the lake. Leon, which is in the northern part of the country here. And although we won't talk about it specifically, you've also got San Juan del Sur, which is a surfing mecca, and also the Corn Islands over here on the east, which are absolutely stunning. But because we've got to cover a lot, we're not going to talk about them specifically. How to get there? You've got flights to and from the USA, normally via San Salvador or perhaps Guatemala City. Direct flights within Mexico and Central America are from Mexico City, Guatemala City, Panama City, and San Jose. And then you've also got quite easy overland transfers to and from Costa Rica. The best time to go is definitely November to April, which is the dry season. It gets incredibly hot and humid in the wet season. I spent a semester there as part of my university degree. And believe me, the hot season, or the wet season, is indeed very, very humid indeed. I think like 94% humidity was about the average. So Granada is one of the oldest cities in the Americas. It is incredibly beautiful. They've got fantastic colonial architecture. UNESCO's poured a lot of money into restoring the old part of town. So they've done up a lot of these pedestrian streets now. You've got fantastic restaurants, really good hotel accommodation. A lot of expats from the US and Canada live there now, so that has really, forced up the standard of accommodation and the quality of food and service and so on as well. So as I said, it's just an hour from Managua. You can drive overland to Leon in the north in 2.5 hours, and it's about an hour and a half to get to Ometepe Island, and that's including the ferry crossing across Lake Nicaragua. There's a lot to see and do in Granada. I would normally recommend as a minimum probably 4 nights, and really up to 5 nights. You can fill the time really easily. There's day trips outside of the city to Mombacho, which is the volcano that overlooks the town. On Mombacho volcano, you've got beautiful cloud forest, you've got coffee farms, and then obviously the crater itself, which you can see like the sulfuric gas and stuff coming out. You've also got Masaya volcano, which is very close by, and in Masaya you've got fantastic handcraft markets. They're huge, and Nicaragua makes really excellent hammocks. They do really good leather work and wicker work as well, so some good things to bring back that are nice and light. Granada also has a lot of really interesting community projects and non-profit organisations that work with local schools and like health initiatives and so on. So if you've got passengers who are interested in that kind of work, then it's worth getting in contact with us and we can put you in touch with them. In terms of adventure activities, you've got kayaking on Lake Nicaragua, you've got the canopy tours and zip lining and so on around Mombacho, and there's also an enormous dormant volcano crater, obviously, that now has a crystal clear lake in it. It's Laguna Apoyo, and that's a really lovely day trip as well. So plenty to see and do, and Granada's a really good base to have clients in because there's a huge range of accommodation options, all these lovely old colonial buildings that have been converted into let's say Nicaraguan 5-star, so probably 4-star hotels. Plaza Colón and La Gran Francia are right on the main plaza. Patio de Malinche is probably more of a 3-star option, but as you can see, it still has this nice central patio area and a swimming pool. And Jicaro Eco Lodge is actually on Lake Nicaragua, right in the shores of the lake at Granada. You've got a collection of about 300 little tiny islands, and Jicaro is located on one of those islands, and it's probably the first deluxe eco lodge in Nicaragua and a fantastic place to have a few nights just to get some R&R and wind down at the end of a long trip. Lake Nicaragua. So as I said, it's the largest freshwater lake in Central America. It's hard to get a sense of just how big this lake is, but basically when it's extremely windy, you can get proper chop on the waters that makes you feel like you're in the ocean. Lake Nicaragua also is home to a species of freshwater shark, which is very endangered, but still there at the moment. And the island of Ometepe is in the middle of this lake. It's actually 2 volcanoes that have risen up out of the lake. So you've got Concepcion, which is this one, and this one down in the photo here, and then Maderas. Concepcion is basically completely has no vegetation whatsoever. So it's a very hot and dusty walk up to the top. And then Volcan Maderas, which is a little bit lower in altitude, is covered in cloud forest. So it's a really, again, it's a tough walk, but it's a really beautiful hike up to the top. And at the top there, you've got, cloud forest and a really beautiful crater area. I normally like to give people 2, or if they've got the time, 3 nights in Ometepe, because again, it's, maybe an hour and a half to get there from Granada, about 45 minutes from the Costa Rican border. The ferries leave from a town called San Jorge and come across to Moyagalpa here. And then from Moyagalpa, you transfer to your accommodation. And the hotel I usually use the most is over here. So it's a reasonable drive around the island. There's also accommodation here and another one up here somewhere. So yeah, I think 2 nights makes it worthwhile. 3 nights if your clients would like to rest and relax a little bit more. To be brutally honest, there's not a huge amount to do, if you like, on the island, unless you like hiking the volcanoes. But there is plenty of wildlife, like monkeys, really beautiful birds, butterflies. Is it safe to walk at night? Do you mean on Ometepe, Georgina? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Nicaragua is actually a very safe country. So when I was there in 2003 for university, there were quite a few problems associated with street kids and crime and so on, particularly in Granada. And then I went back in 2006 and in 2013, sorry. And you really noticed, across the course of that 10 years that the country had improved dramatically in terms of the crime levels, in terms of the number of people on the streets, in terms of literacy and education. So it's come a long way. And I find Nicaragua a very safe place to walk. I was there as a young woman and I never felt threatened. And Ometepe in particular is really laid back, super relaxed. I don't think you'd ever have any problems there. So yeah, as I was saying, apart from swimming and sitting in your hammock and relaxing, there's not a huge amount to do. You can hike volcanoes. They've got a few freshwater swimming holes dotted, particularly along the isthmus here. So you've got really beautiful freshwater swimming pools that you can go and swim in. But yeah, it's a very interesting geography just because of these 2 volcanoes that form the island. Accommodation options are fairly limited and not particularly deluxe. I'd say most of them are around the 3-star range. The Chalet Beach Hotel might be creeping up towards a 4-star. But if you've got super high-end clients, it's really important to explain to them that A, Nicaragua is quite a poor country compared to the rest of Central America, and B, just that the infrastructure and so on Ometepe doesn't really lend itself to five-star accommodation. Leon is the city that I mentioned in the north of the country. So during the Nicaraguan Civil War in the 80s, Granada was always the very conservative base, and Leon was more of the progressive, revolutionary base, if you like. So the two cities have very different views on the Sandinista War and the period of unrest in the 80s. Leon still has a lot of very revolutionary and quite funny anti-American murals that were painted up during that time. So politically, it's really interesting. Historically, it's really interesting. And while Granada has received a huge amount of money from UNESCO and has, really polished the city up, Leon still looks, I guess it still looks as colonial buildings should do, a little bit, kind of slightly crumbling. Nearby, you've got the famous Flor de Caña distillery, which is Nicaraguan's rum that they export to the world. It's probably the only Nicaraguan product you'll ever find overseas. And if you are a rum aficionado, it's one of the best in the world. There is also the nearby Cerro Negro, which is another dormant volcano, and you can go sandboarding on that. They get up to terrific speed, so it's not for the faint-hearted. And then you've also got the San Jacinto mud pools, which are sort of thermal mud pools. You can't get in there because it's too hot, but they're quite interesting to see, all bubbling up and so on. Accommodation options in Leon, just quietly, are fairly limited. I normally use a hotel called El Convento, which is, again, housed in one of these old colonial buildings, but it's not like Granada where you've got a massive array of choices. Next up is Panama. So you definitely all would have heard of the Panama Canal, but what a lot of people don't realise is that Panama actually has a lot to see and do in the interior as well. I was also kind of ignorant about Panama before I went there, and I was really amazed by just how diverse the country is and how mountainous and how covered in jungle it is, actually. So as you can see along Panama really runs sort of east to west, so it's one of the few places in the world where you have to go west to get to the Pacific Ocean. East, sorry. So yeah, along the centre of the country you've got this mountain range, and I think the maximum elevation is only around maybe 1,700 metres, 3,000 metres, sorry. And so the mountains are really covered in cloud forest and very heavy vegetation. Obviously that means a lot of wildlife, a lot of bird life. So there are a lot of things to get out and see and do apart from the canal and Panama City. The places we're going to talk about today are obviously Panama City and the canal that runs through here. We're also going to talk briefly about the San Blas Islands, which are just off this area, and Boquete over here, and then you've got Bocas del Toro up there as well. Panama City is probably the best connected city in all of South and Central America. There are direct flights to and from many, many cities in the USA, to and from many cities in South and Central America, including Cuba and the Caribbean islands. You've got overland connections which run really smoothly to and from Costa Rica, and then you've also got sailing trips which run between Panama and Colombia, which are tourist sailing trips as well. Again, November to April is the best time to visit, being the dry season. But Panama City can really be visited at any time of the year, just as long as people can cope with a little bit of humidity. This photo here is of a part of Panama City that not very many people know about. It's Casco Viejo. And despite the huge amount of high-rise and new buildings in Panama City, it does actually have also this old historic part of town, which is really beautiful, and where I normally like to have passengers stay. So things to see and do. You've got as I said, the old city, which is really interesting to walk around, great architecture, a lot of really beautiful old churches. You've got Panama Viejo, which is the old site of Panama City, now located in sort of the outer parts, I guess. And this is where Panama City was originally located before the pirate Henry Morgan completely sacked and destroyed it in testing my history, might have been the 1700s. And then, obviously, Panama City is mainly famous for the new part of town, more sky rises in Panama City than any other city in South or Central America, including Sao Paulo in Brazil, which is quite hard to believe. Great shopping if you're into that. There's very little taxes paid in Panama, so very good place to go shopping and pick up a few things on the way home. The Panama Canal is obviously the major draw card for most people. I always sort of wondered how interesting a canal could be, but having visited it, I can tell you it's actually really fascinating, and particularly for someone who doesn't come from an engineering or a technical background. The museum is a really, it's really informative, and they give you the information in a very easy to understand way. So I spent a very happy day there and was quite surprised at just how much I really enjoyed it. You can either go to the Miraflores Lock, which is just really close to town, maybe a 15-20 minute cab ride. And at the Miraflores Lock, you've got the museum and also a viewing deck where you can see the ships coming through one of the locks. They also do partial transits as part of a tourist service, so you can go through, they drive you up to Gatun Lake and then you come down through two of the locks towards the Pacific. And they do that every Saturday as well as some other selected dates, except for once a month, and that's when they do the full transit. So you go all the way from the Atlantic side through to the Pacific side. And that's a really fantastic way of getting a feel of how the canal works, and just the level of engineering that's gone into it is unbelievable. They've just finished widening and deepening the canal actually, so they can now take those enormous super tankers. Accommodation in Panama City. So as I said, I normally like to have people in Casco Viejo because you've got all these beautiful old colonial style hotels. Just be warned, Casco Viejo, as well as having lovely accommodation, also has quite a lot of Panama City's best nightclubs. So on the weekends, you need to choose the hotel very carefully in order to have happy clients. As well as these boutique-style hotels, you've obviously always got the modern hotels as well in the business district. And they are a little bit more central. Casco Viejo is quite far south in Panama City, so it's not that close to the centre. But yeah, as I said, the central area is really more business district. So I personally prefer Casco Viejo, and I think it's a nicer place to be based. But if you've got passengers who just want to be in the heart of it all, then the business district is better. San Blas. So this is probably, certainly the most beautiful beaches and islands I've ever seen. It's a collection of islands located off the northern coast of Panama there. You can get direct flights to and from Panama City. It's only about a 20-minute flight. You can also go overland, but the flights are quite cheap and accessible. Because of the distance you go to get out there, I'd normally say 3 nights as a minimum. And those packages include all meals and touring, and you stay with Kuna people, which are the indigenous people to the San Blas Islands. It's actually an autonomous region. So another thing a lot of people don't realize about Panama, is that it actually has a very high indigenous population, and particularly in this region, which belongs to the Kuna people, you really notice that. Most of these islands will have just 1 or 2 families living on them, and you stay with one of the families at the accommodation that's been constructed for tourists. It is, by necessity, pretty rustic. Cabins will mostly have private facilities, but that's not always the case, so always double check. It's only solar electricity, and there's, generally speaking, no hot water showers. So extremely beautiful. Absolutely, for people who love beaches and this kind of, idyllic Caribbean postcard scene, it's an absolute must. But it's definitely not for 5-star clients again. Then you've got Boquete in the middle of the country. If you've got passengers who are travelling during those wet season humid months, this is a really great place to take them for a break from the humidity. At about 1,200 metres, so it's nice and cool and temperate. And it's also Panama's best coffee growing region. So if you've been starved of decent coffee in Central America, which you probably will have been, this is a really great place to go and get a caffeine fix and rest up from the sweaty climate for a few days. You can fly direct from Panama to David in just 1 hour, and then it's a 45-minute transfer by road. This also connects really well with that Bocas del Toro archipelago as well. So it's a good little stop on the way through. Fantastic for outdoor activities. So in particular, hiking, you've got hot springs, great for bird watching. There's rafting at certain times of year down the river here. You've got canopy walks. So there's lots of stuff to do for people who like the outdoors. It's also close to Baru volcano, which is well over 3,000 metres actually. And that's the tallest mountain in Panama. So yeah, if you think about how narrow the country is, it's just 80 kilometres across at the widest point, and then how dramatically that that goes from sea level up to 3,500 metres. It gives you an idea of just how interesting the geography and the topography of Panama is. Finally, you've got Bocas del Toro, which is another extremely beautiful, idyllic kind of beach location, I guess. Again, direct flights from Panama City or from San Jose in Costa Rica. And then there's also this overland transfer, which we like to use to get people in and out of Costa Rica as well. So fantastic for, obviously, beach breaks and snorkeling and things like that. You've also got really great opportunities of seeing dolphins in Dolphin Bay. There's caving and stuff that you can do nearby. So even if your clients aren't particularly beach people, it makes a good stop for a couple of nights to break the journey. And yeah, the scenery is fairly spectacular as well. Also, you know, home to these very beautiful overwater bungalows. And in Bocas del Toro, you can actually get really good accommodation, so it doesn't need to be rustic. This is our and one of the itineraries from our latest brochure, just designed to give people an idea of how you can combine Central American countries. So as you can see, we fly people from Panama City across to David, up to Boquete, and then overland to Bocas del Toro to get up into Costa Rica here. And then from Costa Rica, generally from the northern area, so from Monteverde or Arenal, you can transfer people overland to Ometepe, and then on to Granada and so on. So it makes a really good itinerary. It's only 24 days, so it's actually quite easy to cover a lot of ground in that time because the countries are so small. And yeah, give people a really diverse itinerary that includes, you know, Panama City with all the skyscrapers. You've got like the coffee growing region and cloud forest of Boquete and Monteverde, the Caribbean coastline, and then also the Pacific coastline as well. So yeah, quite a nice way to take people throughout Central America. This is our latest brochure for those of you who haven't seen it. So if you haven't got one in the office, please send us an email, or you can order one through Toll as well. Got more great touring ideas for Central America. And sorry, I'm just going to answer a question. Ooh, it's a long one. Hang on a minute. So the question is, any chance you can get some of this info emailed or look upon your website, especially flights info? So basically all the webinars are loaded up onto our YouTube channel. So you can certainly go back and refresh your information through that way. Otherwise, if you do have specific information that you'd like to receive, please just shoot us an email or feel free to give us a call while your clients are in the office as well, and we can help talk you through a few options for them. But yeah, the YouTube channel is quite a good one because we've got all the previous webinars loaded as well. So if you've got clients coming in who want to talk to you about Argentina, you can hop onto YouTube and go through a couple of those tutorials just to familiarise yourself a bit better. And otherwise, yeah, we're always here if you want to give us a call. So the only thing left to do now is to give you the question to go into the draw for our FMIL. And it's a bit of a trick question today, so don't just shoot us an email. You might have to look into it a little bit. But the question is, where does the famous Panama hat come from? And anyone who's travelled to South America might know the answer to this, and the rest of you will have to Google, I think. So thanks so much for participating in the webinar today, and hopefully we'll see you again in a couple of weeks' time for the next one. And yeah, please let us know if you've got any questions, and otherwise give us a call. Thank you. Bye.